With that, it's time to enter the next part of the show, and that is about the margin squeeze test and ERT. And I will hand over to my dear Vice Chair, Domagoj.
Thanks, Mr. Marby. So, good afternoon. Now we can say that it's good afternoon to everybody, and I would like to start with thanking the BEREC office people for excellent organization, as the other speakers said. And just as the introductory note, this session is named Margin Squeeze Test, What and How, and in this session, the setup will be that the BEREC team drafting team co-chaired by Annegret Groebel from German Regulatory Authority and Katja Mohar-Bastar from Slovenian Regulatory Authority will present guidance document on margin squeeze test or on economic replicability text from the regulatory accounting point of view. That document is on the public consultation from 29th September this year to 24th October, as well as the other documents. After their presentation, we will hear the views of the stakeholders. The views will be presented by the FTTH Council and Mr. Hartwig Tauber, the Director General. After him, it will be ETNO and Mr. Mark Lebouge, and the last one will be ECTA representative, Ms. Erzsebet Fitori. After that, and after all the presentation, we will have a discussion and questions and answers part of the session. So, as I'm moderating this session, I would just like to say in advance that the goal of this panel, from my point of view, it should be that we understand position of the BEREC and the conclusions of the BEREC given in the guidance document, and here I can say the honest views from the side of the stakeholders, and in order to understand and at the end of the presentations, at the end of this session, whether economic replicability tests will ensure the recommendation aimed to provide more pricing flexibility to SMP operators, in that way to foster the investments and at the same time to guard the competition. We were speaking a lot today about the demand side problems, and I think that one of the issues from the economic replicability test is the issue of the pricing flexibility that can be done by making it. There are a lot of different questions about risk sharing, pricing flexibility, penetration pricing, take-up, relevant cost standards that can influence the final outcome of the document, and that can influence the decisions of the regulatory authorities. So I think that it is quite important issue now to discuss about. So we can start with BEREC team and presenting the guidance document. So Annegret and Katja, please take the floor.
Yes, thank you, and good afternoon, and thank you, Domagoj, for introducing us. We will do this presentation jointly, because we jointly shared the drafting team, which was quite a success. We had a lot of NRAs participating, and I think this shows how important this topic is after the adoption of the recommendation on consistent non-discrimination obligations and costing methodologies. And it is often forgotten that there is an important third part or third aspect, let's say, of the recommendation, which is in fact the economic replicability test. And as Domagoj was already mentioning, what is the economic replicability test? Is it the same as a margin squeeze test where there are differences, etc.? And that's what we also, and what will this mean in terms of practical implementation for the work of regulators, and of course for the purpose of the recommendation? Can it be achieved, and in which way can it best be achieved? And this is why we draft drafted this guidance document, and why we put it now to consultation. We want to hear what the market has to say, and we are very interested also in the dialogue today. With this, I hand over to Katja for the slides, and then I'll finish. Okay.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. Well, we will now go through the document, so it will be easier for you to prepare for the public consultation, to prepare your comments, which will be very valuable for us to see what you think about it and what would be the best methodology that NRAs can use for the economic replicability test. The presentation is structured with first we'll explain the purpose and the structure of the document, and then we'll go to main findings and conclusions. So you will not have to read all the document because it's quite long. And then we will discuss about next steps and further timing. As already stated, the guidance document is analyzing the economic replicability test, which is actually very similar to ex-ante margin squeeze test. It's an analysis made from the from the regulatory accounting perspective. And economic replicability test is the test which was introduced by the recommendation on consistent non-discrimination obligations and costing methodologies to promote competition and enhance the broadband investment environment. This was introduced in September 2013. For us, it was really necessary to define methodology. How will we work all together on this, because the recommendation itself has so many methodologies that the analysis will be quite an issue when we will start with it. Our guidance document looks particularly on Recommend 56 and Annex 2 of the recommendation. And as already stated, the recommendation is focusing mostly on markets 4 and 5 from the previous recommendation on relevant markets from 2007. So also guidance document is focusing on the same markets. The ERT, economic replicability test, is the element which is safeguarding competition in case of non-imposition of wholesale access prices, of regulated wholesale access prices. It should be used in the combination with equivalence of inputs and technical replicability. So it's quite a complicated procedure, so if we have some clear methodology already in place, it will be much easier to combine it with 2 other methodologies. So the guidance document, the first is, its aim is to set out possible methodologies. And that's why we tried to see what the current practice from the NRAs is, how they deal with the margin squeeze test for now, because right now we all know ex-ante margin squeeze test, and a lot of regulators, as we saw through the questionnaire we sent out in early summer, and all of the NRAs replied to it, we have all some experiences with conducting this kind of tests. And that's why we tried to compare the similarities and differences between economic replicability test on one hand and ex-ante margin squeeze on the other one. So that will help us to set common methodology with something we already know in practice and something what is prescribed in the recommendation. And of course, we also used all existing documents from the Commission, BEREC, previously RG, and also competition law practice from European Court of Justice. Okay, if we go to the structure of the document, it's structured into 7 chapters. Second one, as I tried to describe already, it takes into account the Annex 2 of the recommendation. We go through all the categories and try to describe them. And then and we used that for the questionnaire we sent to the NRAs. And that is described in Chapter 3. We made the analysis of the received answers. And from that, we got the basic methodological choices of the ex-ante margin squeeze mechanics currently applied. And then we put both things together, the current practice and the theory from the recommendation, and we tried to see what would be the best implementation method for the Annex 2 demands in real life. Chapter 5 is dealing with procedural and transparency issues, which are really complicated as well. And Chapter 6 is dealing with the differences between ex-ante and ex-post margin squeeze test. Okay, so we can now jump to conclusions. Main findings and conclusions. Well, primary objective. The recommendation says the primary objective is to safeguard competition. Through our analysis, we found out that it's not only that, it's also to ensure non-discrimination and to ensure transparency and to prevent exclusion from the market. So we somehow made a wider objective of the RT test. Then we tried to define the test. What it would mean that ex-ante economic replicability assesses whether the S&P's operator retail price can cover all the costs that are wholesale regulated costs, wholesale non-regulated costs, including their own network costs and all the wholesale inputs, and also retail costs as well. So there, at the bottom of the page, you have the formula, which is telling exactly the same as I was trying to put it in a simple way, hopefully. And this was the primary objective and definition of the test. And now we are going to the individual categories which are about to be used in the analysis for the margin squeeze or economic replicability test. When the first one is level of efficiency of the operator. Well, the majority of the NRAs right now uses the reasonably efficient operator or adjusted equally efficient operator as the preferential test for efficiency of the operator. Well, the recommendation started with equally efficient operator and allows some adjustments in cases where there was a late market entry from the alternative operators, or there are really, really low market shares of alternative operator and high market shares of incumbent or S&P operators. But as we see, the preferential from the NRAs was still reasonably efficient operator in our analysis. I think that will be one of the topics which will be discussable the most now. Then, if we go further on, the next categories are relevant cost standard. NRAs mostly use LRIC Plus for regulated wholesale costs and non-regulated wholesale costs, input costs, while the retail costs, they use fully allocated cost, which can be extracted from the accounts of the S&P operator and adjusted to in case if the reasonable efficient operator is used. But here is the problem could be if in this combination of different methodologies there is the NRA is not consistent enough, because you have to be careful when you use several methodologies on one issue. Then we have depreciation method as the next category. Well, actually, we found out that straight line depreciation is chosen by most NRAs, the most commonly used, and also recommendation doesn't put in favor any of them. So both our findings from the analysis and the recommendation agrees that NRAs can use any depreciation method. Reasonable profit, well, this is really important as well. Obviously, WACC is clearly preferred option for the NRAs when calculating the return on invested capital. Well, economic replicability should support build or buy signals, and if there are investment, they should be stimulated when they are efficient. So the reasonable profit should show then when that stimulation, when the efficiency is good, and the investment should be stimulated. Just tell me when you want to take over. Go ahead. Yeah, it's quite long presentation. So the next category are retail costs. While the recommendation takes into account relevant cost categories as marketing, customer acquisition, billing, we found out through the questionnaire that we should add also customer care, bad debt, customer equipment and distribution, product development and management, and we both agree, our analysis and the recommendation, that the reasonable markup for common costs is added. Of course, when you test one product, it's flagship product, you choose which relevant retail costs you will use in that tested product. Then you have to define the average user. You define the average user in the relation between wholesale and retail traffic and wholesale and retail pricing. And so when you have to define that average user, this is something somebody who uses so many call minutes and download traffic included into retail product, or this is his consumption profile, but you have to measure certain data to get a consumption profile, what is sometimes hard to do. The time period depends on the type of investment, whether the investment is connected to the customer or not. If it's connected to the customer, you can depreciate it over the expected average customer lifetime, and if it's not connected to the customer, if it's like equipment or something like that, it is the useful economic life of the asset. The time period should be used. Oh, thanks.
Okay, thanks. We now go one step back, let's say, before then comparing retail and the scope of the retail products and wholesale products to be looked at. So for the wholesale costs, there is of course, for the regulated wholesale costs, as you would do generally in an imputation test, you would take the S&P's operator's price from the reference offer that is based on a regulated cost, mostly the Lyric Plus cost standard approach. So that's, let's say, the easiest part of it. If then there is let's say, something special in the recommendation, and in particular in Annex 2 of the recommendation. On the one side it says you look at regulated products, but then you should also take into account the effectively paid or effectively charged wholesale price. So how does this work together, or what is the interpretation here? On the one side, regulation, on the other side, the effectively charged price. The second part indicates that this is a situation where you have not put cost-oriented wholesale pricing, but where you have put an excess regulation, an excess obligation. Otherwise, I think you can't interpret, you can't make sense out of the provision in Annex 2 of the recommendation. And in that case, that means you include this in your analysis. And for the relevant costs or the relevant price, you also take into account, for example, volume discounts, upfront discounts, etc., long-term discounts that are charged or that are included in the wholesale price agreed between the access seeker and the S&P operator. I think here we can refer to a similar provision that already is included in the NGA recommendation of 2010, limiting the scope for the discounts that can be taken into account before they would include a margin squeeze, or before there would be a risk of margin squeeze, and also, of course, to be consistent with what is in the NGA recommendation. So I think that is one of the statements that we make in the document, that for the assessment of these discounts, you would refer and you would look into the NGA recommendation. Now the question is, what do you do in case you have a completely non-regulated input costs, and there can be a number of inputs which are not wholesale regulated. So the best choice theoretically, of course, would be to use information of network, for example, own network costs of the alternative operator, because after all you want to find out what costs must he cover in order that there's no margin squeeze and that there's enough space to breathe. However, it often proves that this information may not be available. So as a proxy, you can use, and that's what most NRAs do, the S&P operator's cost for these non-regulated input costs as a proxy, which mainly then also comes down to Lyric Plus from the cost accounting standard. Alternatively, as a last option, in order to grasp really this part of the equation that Katja showed at the beginning, you can of course also look at prices commercially agreed on the carrier market as a good way to assess this. So now, which products, according to the recommendation and according to the current practice, are subject to this ex-ante margin squeeze test or the economic replicability test? For the wholesale level, the recommendation foresees that you should take into account the most relevant regulated inputs, or the ones expected to be the most relevant NGA-based wholesale layer input. Including also then on the active and also on the passive level. The inputs that you use there will be a mix of legacy and NGA products. And this mix, of course, may change over time. So the recommendation also foresees that you should adjust this. There's also an additional part which is quite relevant in case there are different geographical segments, or that there are different wholesale products used in the geographical areas. Then this should also be reflected in the margin squeeze test. I think this is quite relevant, and it refers to a problem we saw earlier about the customer, for example, and about the average customer lifetime, etc. All these provisions shall ensure that you do not a margin squeeze test between apples and oranges, but that you really try on the wholesale and the retail level to capture the relevant products and the relevant costs. And if the costs costs vary because of the products vary according to the economic area, to the geographical area, then this should be factored in. So that's a provision that is also in the annex, and we saw this. This, of course, is irrespective of whether the market definition foresees subnational markets or not. This is a provision relating to the remedies level. In what we see currently in the practice, in the current practice of NRAs is they use the ex-ante margin squeeze tests mainly as a complement to cost-oriented price regulation. They use the test to check on the pricing and the regulated prices, and as a safeguard, of course, to competition. The purpose is the same, that's for sure, but that also includes that the products, the wholesale products they submit to the test is broader than the scope foreseen in the recommendation. It's a bit similar on the retail level. The recommendation foresees a focus on the so-called flagship products, which basically means the most relevant retail products, for example, the one that has the highest revenue, or the one with the highest market share, or there are other criteria as well, as the recommendation mentions, for example, to identify the flagship products. You could also use the expenses you have for marketing or for advertisement. So in any case, the idea is to look in particular on so-called flagship products. The NRAs, again, due to the fact that they use it as a complementary tool mainly currently, submit a wider set of retail products to the ex-ante margin squeeze test in order basically to exclude cross-subsidies and to cover all possibilities here, and to ensure that there is replicability for all the relevant retail products, which basically is a wider set. When looking at the retail level and at the retail products, then you also have to take into account the level of aggregation that you look at, and that is a bit different to the bundling topic. You see, we have this on the same slide, and it's also covered, of course, in the document. It is a question of do you do an overall test, or do you do the retail margin squeeze test per product, so on a product per product basis. And we think that doing it on a product-by-product basis ensures that both bundled offers but also standalone offers can be replicable. So in our view, this ensures that you have no form of cross-subsidy, for example, between bundles on the one side and standalone products on the other side, so that both forms of offers can be replicated, which means the test would, in that case, or the regulator then would be neutral vis-à-vis different types of operators and different types of offers, which for us is very important. There's no specific provision here in the recommendation. We think, of course, the guidance document sees that from an economic perspective, from a theory point of view, you can also say that if you do it on an aggregated level and ignore the standalone test and the neutrality between bundled offers and standalone offers, then you may assess higher the economic gains. But again, as the test, the purpose of the whole test is to safeguard competition and to be neutral vis-à-vis different business models, we think that this is an approach that needs to be decided by the NRAs. and which may depend a lot on the different dynamics of retail markets in the different member states. Yeah, they can be very different depending on whether you have more bundled offers or more standalone offers and what the relationship is. And therefore, we advocate here that there should be flexibility for the NRA to decide on this. On the bundles. These need to be integrated, of course, in the analysis, and we all know that there's a tendency towards more bundled offers, in particular in this area, double play, triple play, and the recommendation itself also mentions bundles. And they consider that very often the flagship products, which we mentioned before, are in fact bundles. Yeah? And I think that is true, so they would in any case be needed to be included here. Then the question occurs, what type of bundles must be included in the analysis, or in other words, must be submitted to the test. This, in our view, are not only bundles with regulated products, because one of the nature, I think, is of bundles in these markets, in the broadband retail markets, is in fact that they consist of component of regulated but also of unregulated components, and therefore we think in order to capture the economic reality of the market and of the demand side of the market and the retail market dynamics, you must submit to the test all types of bundles, and of course the ones that let's say that determine the market dynamic most. So that is why we say that NRAs should submit the bundles that are relevant to the market or in the market in their analysis. So again, to ensure that competitors are able to offer this, and they, of course, also have to assess, according to the market situation, the type and the components of the bundles they include in the test. Then these are, let's say, as you can imagine, very typical elements of any margin squeeze type of analysis. And we come in a minute also to the question of the difference to ex post margin squeeze tests. So you also have to look at the question: do you look at retail prices or do you look at revenues? As we said already, given the fact that you also look at bundles, you may have to look at revenues rather than at individual prices in order to perform a meaningful analysis. Of course, and that refers back to what I just said, this is determined, or this is impacted also by the level of aggregation you choose as for the test, as well as the question of how to treat standalone and bundled offers. So this is related to this. Next part to consider on the retail level is the question of promotions and temporary discounts. Because they are an important element in general in the retail market strategy, and therefore we think as BEREC that they should be taken into account. And we have found also some ERG document that already dealt with this and came up also with a solution of a kind of ex-ante communication obligation. And of course, we would like to hear also your views on this to ensure that promotions and so-called temporary discounts are not, let's say, undermining the effective retail price or the average retail price, and in that way could cause a margin squeeze, let's say, a little bit through the back door. So that's why we say it's important here to take account of promotions and temporary discounts. Again, as the strategy and the use of promotions and temporary discounts vary a lot across Europe, across member states, depending on the market situation, the market structure, the market players in the different member states. It is up to the NRA to decide in which way these and which of these promotions and temporary discounts need to be factored in. There are in terms of cost accounting, there are different ways of doing this. This is described in the guidance document. I won't go into the detail here now. I won't prolong the presentation too long. Because now I come to an interesting aspect, and of course we are asking for comments on this on this item. This is called procedural and transparency issues, and what is really meant here is what does ex ante test exactly mean, and which powers do the regulators have to prevent or to stop a margin squeeze that they detect with the test. Because otherwise an ex ante margin squeeze test would make no sense. So the recommendation clearly outlines that NRAs should have in place a procedure and should clearly announce to the market for transparency reasons on how they would do the test. And that, I think, is absolutely clear. We want the test, we want the market to understand the test ex ante. And it is here very important also for the predictability of all players, for all players, to know what is going to happen and how the test is exactly applied. So this is, let's say, the general a general statement or general document of the NRAs that they should have out. Because on the other side, we all know this, the testing itself of retail offers of SMP operators may require certain, let's say, may not allow full transparency, because if a suggested retail offer is known beforehand by the competitors, clearly the effect is gone, and we don't want to preempt the strategy of the SMP operator. That would not be in the interest of the NRAs. However, we do want to prevent an ex-ante margin squeeze, and therefore, if we submit, according to what I outlined before, the retail offer, the draft retail offer, let me call it, to the test, and if we find here that there is a margin squeeze, in other words, that the test is failed, then we must act and we must stop the margin squeeze. So the offer, there are three possibilities here, and the recommendation outlines that Article 10 of the Authorization Directive empowers NRAs to take appropriate measures to prevent the margin squeeze to happen. That is the very nature of an ex-ante margin squeeze test. And there also are the possibilities of fines, but fines is usually an instrument of ex post. So let's focus on the appropriate measures mentioned in Article 10 of the Authorization Directive. This could take three forms. Either the retail price would be changed, or the wholesale price for the, let's say, unregulated elements would be changed, or so that in the combination or combination of the two, yeah, so that as an outcome, as a result of these measures, you would have a sufficiently large margin with which the operators can breathe, and that there would be no margin squeeze anymore. The most radical measure, of course, would be to stop the retail offer. Yeah, these are, let's say, the basic three options, and according to the recommendation, this could happen under Article 10 of the Authorization Directive. The other option, of course, also is, and this may happen in reality maybe, also that the S&P operator amends on his own or withdraws on his own initiative the retail offer. In any case, it is clear that the margin squeeze, if found in the test, cannot exist, and such an offer could not go further. Yes? Yeah, I'm finishing now. I think it's nearly the last slide. So on competition law, just to mention this again, and we have referred already a lot to margin squeeze test in the competition law area. We know that there is a lot of jurisdiction also and a lot of decisions of the Commission. Just yesterday or the day before yesterday announced a new case of Deutsche Telekom, Slovak Telekom to be fined for a margin squeeze. This is, as I said, not the option in the case of an ex-ante margin squeeze. So the main difference is between ex-ante and ex-post, but the structure of the test is rather similar. So I think we saw this also already in the formula that we found. So now the last slide, and we be gone here. The plenary of BEREC adopted this paper for public consultation on the 26th September. Now the public consultation runs since, it's not 2nd of October, sorry, it's 29th of September through to 24th of October. And if I may add something here, because you see the next slide, the next time is a contact network where we have to channel the document through, which basically implies any comment we didn't get by 24th of October must be disregarded. So no prolongations possible. Because the final goal is to have the final document after consultation, evaluation of the comments, ready for plenary Q4, beginning of December, and then to adopt the plenary to adopt the document and to have it ready for final publication. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you for this quite comprehensive report, and I would just like to skip to the FTTH Council input.
Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I want to thank BEREC, Göran and Fatima for inviting us here as the FTTH Council, giving an intervention on the draft of the economic replicability test. That's a difficult word for an Austrian guy every time. Some of you might wonder why the FTTH Council is giving an intervention on this topic, because we're not always focusing especially on these kind of issues. But we believe that especially this kind of document will be very important if we talk about the specific fiber to the home and fiber to the building rollouts of the SMP operators in the next years in Europe, because, you know, as our organization is only standing for fiber to the home and fiber to the building, that's also the focus of the topics I want to raise in the next few minutes. And I want to state that the FTTH Council is and has always been a strong advocate for competition. So we believe competition is important, but we also realize on the fiber to the home side, it might not always be competition on the infrastructure level, because especially in the rural areas, there might be the competition on the service level. And this is something that needs to be considered when we do this kind of margin squeeze tests, that here the geographical segmentation should take into account. Talking about this margin squeeze test, we also see that if it's used in a very sensible way, it can be a very good driver for competition in Europe, but there is also some dangers behind it. One of them is, and it was mentioned I think during the presentation, it could also mean that you bring in regulated retail prices through the back door, through this margin squeeze tests. And the other one is that we see as an FTTH Council, in particular in the gray areas, that if you have this margin defined in a, let's say, quite comfortable way for alternative operators, there could be the danger that alternative operators just stick to their own, stick to the unbundling and do not invest into their own networks. We also have one question to the authors of the document, which we think still needs to be more clarified, and this is if we now remove physical unbundling in some of the new market definitions, will we move up or down on the ladder of investment on these kind of tests? And we also see another topic that we want to comment on, and it is or has to do with what was extensively discussed on the discount, taking into account discounts and these kind of pricing elements. Because if you go for a fiber network and the fiber to the home network, we still see in Europe, even today, that take-up rates are quite low. And take-up rates are one of the most important and the most relevant parts of the business case. So everyone who is going into fiber investments will need to make sure that customers take up these fiber networks as quick as possible. And that will need some kind of advertisement, some kind of well-priced offers at the beginning to make sure that the customers switch from the old-fashioned copper to the fiber networks at the end. And so this is something where we welcome that there is the approach of flexibility also for the NRAs to look at this kind of market situation, and then we would like to see that it's really applied in a way that take-up rates for fiber networks get high very quickly. Another topic which was also mentioned and we want to highlight in particular on fiber networks is the topic of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 kind of bundled products, because especially on the fiber networks, with all the new opportunities on the bandwidth, it's important that we don't create too much complexity. If a new bundled product with a lot of services is coming on the market in an innovative way. So we see here a big challenge, I believe, for the NRAs to have a look at these products. This is something we would therefore also like to see, and again, I need to say it's always fiber to the home, fiber to the building, what I'm focusing on, that there is some kind of view that this margin squeeze test can be a danger for the competition on the infrastructure side, as I said, if it's used in a too strict way at the end. Another topic which I just want to highlight because it shows, I think, also the complexity of the whole topic is that as we don't have a geographical regulation at the moment, but just a nationwide, we face already in some areas in Europe the situation where the SMP operator is an SMP operator on the nationwide scale, but on a local scale where others already have deployed fiber networks, they are more or less a competitor that has, for competition reasons, maybe has to go for fiber, but then through a margin squeeze testing could have some kind of big challenges to get his investment done at the end. So we really appreciate the work that the BEREC is doing on this margin squeeze test work, and we believe there is a big potential in this one to ensure that also on the fiber to the home rollout side it can help to move forward fiberizing Europe, and we hope that it is also ensured that with these testings it's not adding another level of uncertainty for the SMP operators who want to invest into fiber, but that it helps them, while keeping, of course, competition running, to ensure that fiber networks are rolled out in Europe as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Tauber. Now we will follow with Mr. Mark Lebouche from ETNO, and the question that you posed, we'll write it down, and later on it can be answered by our BEREC team.
Good afternoon. I am Marc Lebauche from Orange, but speaking for ETNO, and I thank BEREC for this event. My talk addresses how the economic replicability test defined in the recommendation should be applied to fulfill its objectives. I focus on economics rather than regulation, hence the analysis could apply outside the context of the recommendation. My presentation is dedicated to the challenge of specifying the test in the case of NGA investment. Classical issues of margin squeeze implementation are not addressed in detail. The recommendation states clear objectives: guarantee an appropriate balance between ensuring efficient entry and sufficient incentive to invest, guarantee a degree of pricing flexibility for NGA investors, share some of the investment risks by differentiating wholesale access prices according to the access seekers' level of commitment, ensure that the SMP operators is not put at a disadvantage vis-à-vis access seeker regarding sharing of the investment risk. NGA investments consist in fiber optics rolled out to ultimately replace the copper, either partly with the FTTN architecture or more with the FTTB or fully with the FTTH. It takes place under various degrees of competition from copper, cable, and LTE. More fiber means more investment and more risk. FTTH is more risky than FTTN. NGN investment payback time is from 1 to several decades. Short-term balance of such investment over a few years is clearly negative. Long-term profitability over several decades is uncertain. In its 2013 communication, the Commission states, legal certainty is particularly important given that investment in fast broadband networks incurs significant costs while demand for end products remains uncertain. The NGA investor's economics can be split between its retail and its wholesale activities using elementary algebra. Revenue minus cost of global NGA activity is the addition of revenue minus cost of the wholesale activity plus revenue minus cost of the retail activity times retail market share. And the revenue minus cost of the retail activity is exactly the economic replicability test. On the short time frame of a customer lifetime, the global NGA investment profitability is negative. If in this time frame the retail activity, that is the equivalent economic replicability test, is positive, then it means that the wholesale activity is necessarily very negative. So, if standard margin squeeze methodology applies to the economic replicability test, the outcome contradicts the objective. With a wholesale access price adjusted for the test, there are guaranteed profit for access seekers and guaranteed deficit for upstream investors. This would not fairly share the investment risk between the investor and the access seekers, as LRIC plus cost standards, including fiber infrastructure, is incompatible with the time frame of a customer lifetime. There are two ways to escape this incompatibility. Either switch from consumer lifetime to infrastructure lifetime, or keep consumer lifetime but limit the LRIC plus standard to downstream costs. Option 1 is a discounted cash flow on infrastructure lifetime for the upstream infrastructure cost. It is economically consistent, but the long time frame increases regulatory discretion as today's access price could depend on hypotheses on fiber penetration in several decades. Therefore, this option typically concerns NGR projects with not too long payback period, maybe FTTN more than FTTH, and not too risky, in which case the investor enjoys some control over the market migration to NGA. In option 2, the test is made on the customer lifetime, but the ELRIC cost standard applies only to downstream costs. Risk-sharing wholesale prices for NGA access are supported by 2009 framework, the NGA recommendation, and the non-discrimination and costing recommendation. It may correspond to lightly nonlinear prices through volume or price time discounts, or more heavily nonlinear prices through upfront payments or co-financing. Here we consider all these as two-part tariffs, one part directly proportional to the volume of access and the rest considered as fixed. The fixed part is not incremental on the customer lifetime. Hence, only the variable part of the wholesale price should be included in the test. Does an economic replicability test based on the ELRIC plus downstream cost plus variable wholesale price fulfill the objectives? It actually guarantees a fair competition between all competitors which have secured access to the NGA infrastructure. All, including the incumbent, face equivalent variable costs and equivalent challenges to cover their respective fixed costs. But to achieve this, efficient access seekers must be able to secure access to NGA, and foreclosure strategy via excessive fixed access price must be prevented. We studied two possible solutions, either a regulatory oversight of the wholesale prices or addition of a transitory competition migration test. One option to avoid foreclosure is direct regulatory control of fixed versus variable wholesale prices. The challenge here is that the optimal solution depends on individual cases, which implies continuous regulatory assessment of individual wholesale contracts, which may not be fully aligned with the philosophy of the recommendation. The second option is to add a transitory competition migration test, as more specifically proposed by my Orange colleague Jono and I in the European University Institute paper, which happened to be referenced in BEREC's consultation paper. During the transition of market players from copper to NGA, NGA retail price of the incumbent should not squeeze copper unbundler, as expressed in the formula. NGA retail price should be larger than copper wholesale price plus downstream cost, plus the NGA customer premium. Measuring this premium may be impractical. Then the competition migration test becomes NGA retail price should be larger than copper wholesale price plus downstream costs. This simplified test could help the NGA customer value to be included in the fixed wholesale price, supporting a socially efficient level of investment. The competition migration test balances commercial negotiation on access condition because the investor needs that the customers of his competitors migrate in order to make its investment profitable. But it cannot achieve this unilaterally with its NGA retail strategy. Therefore, it needs a fair agreement with its competitors on NGA access condition, allowing the migration of its competitors' customer to the new infrastructure. Under the competition migration test, all parties need an agreement on access condition. As I said, the incumbent needs the migration of its competitors' customer, and competitors cannot let the NGA retail market to its rival. Once one agreement is reached, other agreements will follow, as the first rival can price below the competition migration test, and competitors may buy NGA access either to the incumbent or to its rival. When the NGA retail market is competitive, the transitory competition migration test is removed. Besides these specific challenges related to NGA investment, ETNO also has clear position on traditional margin squeeze issues. Equally efficient operator standard without adjustment and multi-period discounted cash flow should be used. In line with the multi-service nature of NGA and the need for price flexibility, the test should be limited to global portfolio or to dominant products and not product by product. And the wholesale product should be the most relevant in each geographical area. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Labouche. Now we can follow with Mrs. Fitori.
Thank you very much. We very much welcome BEREC's very detailed and very comprehensive work on economic replicability tests or ex-ante margin squeeze tests, however we call them. As I mentioned, we believe that having a sound methodology on preventing margin squeezes is particularly important in a transitional period when we are moving towards a new technology. We are moving towards potentially infrastructures which have a different topology from the current copper and DSL networks. And also, we have a lot of experience behind us. As Annegret has highlighted, I think NRAs have accumulated a lot of experience with regard to ex-ante margin squeeze tests. And I think it is very important to highlight that a lot of NRAs see this as a complementary tool to price regulation. We entirely agree with that approach. We think that it is very important to have proper price regulation in place, and then that should be complemented by ex-ante margin squeeze tests, because we know from the practice of the Court of Justice and the Commission that it can occur that there are margin squeezes even in the case of regulated wholesale access prices, and to have proper ex-post checks done as well, also by the NRA to test whether I think some of the inputs into the ex-ante margin squeeze test were correct. The other lesson of history is really from the ex-post application of margin squeeze tests. We know that in the transition to basic broadband, an awful lot of margin squeeze has occurred, and it has effectively obstructed the competitive development of the market. And I think that also highlights that history, that it is very important to do the margin squeeze test at different levels. But and it is also very important, I think what Annegret has highlighted, is that we have just had one of the cases decided, I think it was yesterday, by the European Commission, where we also see repeated abuse and a reaction of fines to the repeated abuser. So maybe just to go a little bit to the basic definition or kind of what the obligation should be. Of course, it is extremely important to ensure that there is no margin squeeze between the retail offer vis-à-vis the wholesale inputs. It is also very important, as we know that we are moving towards a more and more bundled retail market, to ensure that the SMP operator doesn't bundle unreasonably and that it doesn't squeeze the margins for bundles, which is, I recognize, a complicated issue, but it is becoming more important as we move forward. And finally, not to squeeze margins between different wholesale access products. One of the biggest abuse cases of DG competition, which then went to the European Court of Justice, was really a margin squeeze case from the Spanish market, where we have seen that there was a margin squeeze between two wholesale access products, resulting in effectively almost foreclosing the market and preventing alternative operators, and I think that is a very important point, preventing alternative operators to invest in local loop unbundling and to climb up on the ladder of investment, which after the margin squeeze was removed from the market actually occurred pretty actively in the Spanish market. But for quite a long period of time, as a result of that margin squeeze, broadband take-up was one of the lowest in Europe, and end-user prices were amongst the highest. And I think this is precisely the situation that we would like to avoid if, I think also as the FTTH Council emphasized, that demand take-up is going to be extremely important in order to support investments. In the presence of a margin squeeze, take-up is not going to happen. It is very important that NRAs specify the margin squeeze in advance, the margin squeeze test in advance, and complement it by ex-post checks. What we think should be the main principles of the margin squeeze test. We fully support and agree with the majority of NRAs that it is the reasonably efficient operator test that should be used. That should be the required standard. And the relevant question to be asked is whether the difference between the incumbent's retail price and wholesale prices sufficient for a reasonably efficient downstream competitor to earn a normal profit. We think that the test should be passed by each offer. It should not be permitted, I think, as was also mentioned by Annegret, that there is abusive cross-subsidization between different products, and margin squeeze just not occur actually at all in the market. Bundles are also very important in this regard, so the margin squeeze that should be passed by bundles and also promotions. And here I think the additional elements are also very important. So it happens quite often that there are some promotional elements which are not related at all to the wholesale access products, which can be an equipment, which can be a cashback, that those are duly taken into account and those are also replicable. The test should be applicable at each level of the value chain, so the test should be actually passed from each wholesale access product to each retail product. And that is also very important in order to ensure, I think, in a quest to have as many operators as possible to invest, that the alternative operators have the necessary margins that they can invest then in their future networks. I think the danger is not so much that if the alternative operator has a too big margin, that they will sit comfortably on one rung of the ladder. The real risk is the opposite, that if their margins are being squeezed, if they cannot make a reasonable profit, then they will not have the sufficient cash flows and they will not have the sufficient trust of the investors community to actually invest in alternative networks, which then undermines, of course, the principle and the practical implementation of infrastructure-based competition. The time frame of the test is also very important. It should be on a period-by-period basis. I think you've mentioned the average lifetime of the customer. What is important, I think, from an alternative operator's perspective and also from the perspective that no single product should squeeze margins, is that it should be the lifetime or the average lifetime of the customer on the tested product, on the given product. To move to the questions of procedure, so what should be the powers of the NRAs and what should the procedure look like? We think that an ex-ante margin squeeze test or replicability test should be genuinely ex-ante. It should be carried out before the launch of the product on the retail market. And then there should be, of course, a possibility to submit complaints if indeed later in the commercialization of the product it turns out that there is a margin squeeze present. We think that the mechanism should be a pre-notification of offers with a burden of proof for compliance on the SMP operator. So I think the question that Annegret has asked is whether there should be some sort of obligation to communicate the promotions or the bundles. We think that there should be such an obligation, and that is really that pre-notification obligation on each product. NRAs should be properly empowered to, I think, intervene in the market as they see necessary. And that empowerment should include several elements. They should be empowered to stop the launch of the product and or require the suspension of the product if necessary as the ultimate tool in their hands. They should be empowered to require the SMB operator to amend its wholesale or retail price or withdraw the abusive offer. And also we think that actually NRAs should be empowered to impose fines, especially to deter repeated abuses. And then finally, it should be complemented by ex post checks to verify that the assumption of the ex ante tests were correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, as we are a little bit out of time, maybe we can take one or two short questions on the board. And while thinking about the questions, maybe Annegret can answer on the questions of the FTTH Council.
Yes, I think there was one question related to the question of whether a new type of product like Vula or something like this means moving up or moving down the ladder. I think indeed this needs to be analyzed. We have thought about this in another context of NGA documents, and partly it depends on the type of Vula product and whether it is closer to the LLU or closer to the bitstream. There, as you know, there's a range, and it is in between the two classical rungs, if I may say so. And I don't want to preempt, let's say, the final outcome here, and probably it also varies across member states. However, what is clear is if this product may replace other access products, would then be considered the most relevant wholesale input product, which would then be one side of the equation, would enter into the test and would in that regard then be submitted to the test. But I think that's indeed an interesting point that could be made more explicit. What was the second question? Oh, yes. Yes, as you said, and as we also mentioned in the presentation, we think that the discounts and or temporary discounts, promotions, etc., need to be taken into account. I take it you also think we should consider the purpose of these discounts as a means to increase demand side take up. I think this is an important aspect to look into, and let's say it relates most likely to the question, where are the limits for penetration pricing, because I think the tests would be failed if ultimately you would justify some discount, which then would create, even if it is for the purpose of increasing the demand, would nonetheless create a margin squeeze. So that is where the limit would be. Maybe can be made more explicit. Thank you for the aspect.
Okay. Thank you, Annegret. And do we have one short question or no? Okay, thanks for all the panelists, and just in a way to wrap it up, we are waiting your written comments as well, and all the comments will be taken on board, and if agreed inside the BEREC, it will be put in the document. So it will be, when we see all this discussion, it will be quite challenging to the BEREC and to the national regulatory authorities as well to meet somehow extreme goals with making the economic replicability test, but it is a nice part of this work. So thank you all.
Okay, it's time for lunch, and I will give you, because we overstepped our time a little bit, but I will try to start I will give you 7.5 minutes extra. And anyone who's not in the room by then, I will close the door. Okay? Let's go for lunch.